Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, state of the program for Billy Napier in the Florida Gators, going into a 2025 season where I think a lot of Florida Gator fans are expecting it to all come together. And I think if you're a Florida fan, there's a lot of optimism that it just might do that in 2025. This is a conversation that has drastically shifted. I mean, you go back to the end of the month of September in the 2024 year, we were making episodes talking about the next head coach for the Florida Gators going into 2025. Now you fast forward to the end of January, going into the month of February, and say, we kind of want to see one more year of what Billy Napier can do going into 2025. By far the most talented roster that he's had at his time at Florida, a program that seems to be really turning the corner and going in the right direction. Want to take a look at Billy Napier's tenure as a whole, talk about where Florida sits right now, what's going well, what do we still have question marks about. Now, I think before we get into it, and as always, the Florida Gator fans, let it fly in the comment section. There are a lot of different ways you can look at where Florida sits as a program right now. And the best way to kind of gauge that is kind of hearing from the Florida Gator fans themselves. So let it fly in the comment section. The support that the Florida fans have shown the boys has been amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let it fly in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into it now. Where do you start when you're evaluating Billy Napier and the Florida Gators? It starts with on the field play. The first 2 years, or really the first 2.5 years, kind of halfway through the 2024 season, it was pretty clear an underperformance. It was not going in the right direction. It was a lot of inconsistency. It was a lot of sloppy play on both sides of the football. And then DJ Lagway comes back healthy, and it just the month of November, that all kind of changed. And it seemed like Florida was consistently playing really good football. And my biggest takeaway coming out of the month of November, where Florida was really getting hot there, is they showed us a ceiling, a level of play from the Florida Gators that we haven't seen from Billy Napier previous to that. Beating a team like Ole Miss that I think has a national championship caliber roster in that 2024 year, beating a team like LSU, they showed a level of consistency. And then that second, like that winning culture that seemed to be coming on throughout this program, that's what excites you the most. The first 2.5 years on the field have been disappointing. There's no secret about that. But that glimpse that we saw at the end of November, I think gives a lot of Florida fans some optimism in terms of what's it going to look like in 2025. And I think we all kind of agree Billy Napier, this Florida Gators performance in 2025 in terms of how they look and how dangerous they can be, it's going to give us a really good sense. Is it going to work out for Billy Napier or not in Gainesville? And the one thing you just want to see a little bit more of is consistency. And I feel like that's the one thing that's really lacked with Billy Napier and the Florida Gators. There's been some really sloppy pre-snap penalties at some really not ideal times. You've seen some troubles with turnovers. I think an overall take here is that it just seems like we've seen different versions of a Florida Gators team any given Saturday. And if you want to be a team that competes at the highest level of the SEC, competing for national championships, everything we expect from this Florida Gators program, there's got to be that level of consistency that they find in 2025. On the field play, tricky to kind of talk about because the first 2.5 years, not so good. The last couple of weeks of the season, really damn good. By far the best football we've seen this Florida Gators program play. What's it look like in 2025? Probably going to determine what the future is of Billy Napier as the head coach of the Florida Gators. Now, on the field play is where you start when you're evaluating where a program is, but I think everybody that follows the sport of college football closely knows that there are some other factors that you have to evaluate when you're evaluating where a program is. And I think talent acquisition is that second thing we have to talk about, which I've been a very big fan of the last couple of years. You take a look at the high school recruiting has consistently gotten better for Billy Napier. And even in 2025, finishing 10th in the country with an opportunity to maybe even move up a little bit more with Onis Conanbanny, finishing top 10 in a 2025 cycle that was very hard for Billy Napier to build a class with all the conversation about his job security was really impressive. This is one of those teams that it feels like they're one of the hottest teams in the country on the recruiting trail. And I feel like the talent acquisition is going in the right direction. I think the other thing I would note is player retention. Not only keeping your best players out of the transfer portal, which is really important, especially when you're a Florida Gators program that has a lot of young talent. I think secondly, keeping some players out of the NFL draft for one more year. I talk about guys like Caleb Banks, like Jake Slaughter, laundry list of other guys that very well could. Tyreek Sapp, another good example, could have gone to the NFL, decided to stay. That continuity, that player retention is something I'm paying attention to going into 2025. Now, last thing, I like quarterback recruiting, not only DJ Lagway, but I really like Will Griffin in the 2026 class. The one, if I were to nitpick a little bit, is the offensive line recruiting. You look back at the last couple of classes, only 3 blue chip guys in the last 2 classes on the offensive line. I'm really big fan of some of their evaluations. Najee Harris, a guy from 2 classes ago, a guy that wasn't necessarily a blue chip according to the recruiting services, but a guy that Florida really liked and a guy that certainly looks like they hit on the recruiting trail. I'm a fan of some of the evaluations. You still want to stack as much blue chip talent on the offensive line as you can, because at the end of the day, it's hard to build that sucker in the portal. You got to get guys out of the high school ranks. And it does seem like in 2026, we talked about it last weekend, Florida seems to be prioritizing the offensive line on the recruiting trail. I'm a fan of the talent acquisition. I think the most broad conversation you can have is, hey, has Billy Napier and this coaching staff put a team on the football field going into 2025 that from a talent standpoint gives you a chance to win an SEC championship? I think the answer is yes. On paper, with the talent they have, I think Florida has a chance to play college football at the highest level in the country. That's all you can ask for. Now, does it all come together? That's kind of what we have to get into. And I think the second or third thing you want to talk about is player development, which was not good early, right? The first couple of years, it felt like there were a lot of guys that were underperforming, not getting better as football players. I will say this, the coaching staff changes, not only from a coordinator standpoint with a guy like Ron Roberts, but from a position coach standpoint, I think it got significantly better in the 2024 year. I mean, in 2024, you only had 1 NFL draft pick in Ricky Pearsall. You fast forward to 2025, there's a long list of guys that are going to be drafted from this Florida program. And there's even longer list of guys that could have gone to the NFL draft, guys like Caleb Banks, guys like Jake Slaughter that are coming back for one more year. This might be the change in Florida that I'm most optimistic about. Is in 2024, you just felt like this team got better as a whole. You saw a lot of individual players take steps as football players. That's what excites me the most. The recruiting, I think, is there. The coaching, the player development probably wasn't quite there. I do think it's kind of coming along going into the 2025 year. And I think the last thing you have to talk about is coaching staff. And I think Florida, the one knock I have is the same knock that every single Florida Gator fan has, and that is the lack of an offensive coordinator hire. And look, Billy Napier's going to die on the sword. Live or die by the sword is probably the better way of putting it, right? It's either going to work out with DJ Lagway in 2025, they're going to win a lot of football games, and Billy Napier seems to have a job for the next 5 years. If this team continues to go in the direction they're going, if it does not work out, and Billy Napier is calling the plays on offense, and you can't figure it out with a quarterback like DJ Lagway with 4 returning starters on the offensive line, I think a ton of talent at the wide receiver spot, Billy Napier's probably not going to have a job in 12 months from now. Rob Sale doing a really good job with the offensive line. I think the running backs coach doing a good job. Billy Gonzalez with the wide receivers doing a good job. And I think the biggest change is all the stuff that we saw on the defensive side of the football, right? Ron Roberts comes in clearly just a better defense, not only from a talent standpoint, but it doesn't take you that long to watch this Florida Gators team and say this defense looks better schemed up. It looks more disciplined. It looks like they have a better feel of what they're doing on the football field. I credit Ron Roberts for that. There was a lot of conversation around Florida fans wanting a defensive coordinator. Look, I think he got one. And Ron Roberts, with what he did in the 2024 year, Jarrell Chapman, awesome job. This defensive line took a monster step in the right direction. I believe finished top 10 in the country in sacks, especially in the month of November when Florida was playing their best football. It was a dominant performance from this Florida Gators defensive line. Will Harris doing a really good job with the defensive backs, especially some of the young guys. A guy like Sharif Denson, a guy like Dejon Johnson, they seem to be getting better in the back end as well. Massive upgrade from Corey Raymond. It might have took Billy. This will be my overall take around where Florida is here. It took Billy Napier 2 years to kind of figure it out. And that kind of makes sense. Like, this was a big step from where Billy Napier was. And we kind of knew there might be some growing pains, and the growing pains were probably a little bit more than a lot of Florida fans were probably looking for. But at the end of the day, this team seems to be in a good spot. And one thing I'll say is, like, look, Florida took their lumps early in 2024. That's a program that you would see a lot of players, locker rooms kind of quit. This locker room never did. Even with all the noise from myself and all the national media members talking about Billy Napier and his job security, this team always seemed to be bought in to what Billy Napier was trying to do. And you kind of get through those growing pains. I look at Florida going into 2025 and say that this team seems to be going in the right direction. I think the state of the program is much healthier than a lot of people across the country probably perceive. And we're going to find out real quick in 2025. We'll close it down there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, Florida fans, let it fly in the comment section. Am I too optimistic? Maybe I am. Let me know. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.